Hey, what is going on, people? This is Hellbent, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use my Bitmap Maker to create your own window designs, control designs, etc., and then how to use those in a script. And then afterwards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you take a button design that I've created, and I'm going to, from scratch, I'm going to create a class for it to manipulate the button, to resize it, do all kinds of options with it. And I'm going to do that from scratch, step by step, and explaining everything that I do along the way, so that way you can take your own designs and you'll know exactly what to do to create your own button classes, so you can start creating your own button creations, etc. So to start with, let's go through how to use the Bitmap Maker. So the current version of the Bitmap Maker is currently 0.1.7. If you're watching this video in the future, there might be further updates to it. I do plan on continuing working on it, but I don't know when the next time I'll have the time or patience to go through it. It's a quite complex program, so I don't know when I'll get around back to it again. But there'll be a link in the description if you don't have it, or if you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date one. I created a playlist for all the videos related to the HB Bitmap Maker. The first video in the playlist is where I post any new updates. So in order to make sure that you have the current update, you always go to that one. It's a 13-second video that just has some text on the screen with an arrow pointing down to the description. Says go to the description to get the latest update. Every time I make an update, I post it to that one. I don't post. So in this video, even though I'm talking about the Bitmap Maker, there's no link to the actual script in this video. There's a link to a video that will have the link to the most up-to-date version of it. This version is an alpha version, and one of the things about it is that it's written for 100% DPI scaling. So if you have like a really high resolution monitor, you might have a setting that's adjusted your DPI scaling, so that way things scale for your monitor up to like 125% or 150%. Typically it's 125%. Some of the text on some of the controls will be a little bit big. There's a regular viewer that has gone through, and if he's nice, I know he's going to watch this. If he's nice, maybe he'll be nice, and in the comments maybe he'll post a link to the alterations he's made, because he's made it fit his high resolution monitor. But that's only if he's nice. If he wants to do it, you know, super for you people with high resolution monitors. He took the time to do it, so thanks to him if he does post something. But for the rest of us that use regular 100% DPI scaling, no problems. So there's a couple of tools I'm going to use for the first part of the video. All of these that I'm going to be using are available on my channel, and I will leave a link to where you can get a copy of them in the description. So one of them is this color picker, which allows you to select any color that's on your screen, and then that gets loaded into your clipboard. Now I can paste that color in somewhere. I can also manually use these sliders to adjust RGB values to generate colors. I can do a grayscale. I can also save colors for if I'm working on a project. I have a couple of color palettes that I want to save. I can put them into here, and then each time I load this up, they'll always be ready for me. And the last thing it has is this color generator. So I can generate random colors over and over and over, get random colors, and I can select their range. So a color has a range between 0 and 255. So if I want all colors to generate between all colors, I just leave 0 to 255, 0 to 255. But what if I want only green color? So I'll set this to 0, I'll set this to 0, and I'll generate, and now it's all green colors. And the same with the blue, red. I can have maybe this one I want to have between those two colors. So there'll be a link to this in the description. I think it's two tools left. This one is the Bitmap Maker uses Gdip library, this is a tool that has the Gdip library built all into it, but I've broken everything into lists of all the functions. So in here I have a list of every single function that's in the library. So if I'm looking for a very specific function, I can go through the list, find it, and clip the prototype for it, or the function call for it. Or I can clip the whole function, or I can clip the whole Gdip library and put it into my file. So there'll be a link in the description for this. The last one is this custom tool maker, custom window maker. So this allows me, if I'm creating a window, like this custom window here, so this is a default window with default controls, but if I want to make my own windows, this tool here allows me to get from scratch, from no code in my script, to having the window up and running in just a couple of seconds. So that's what this does, and we'll go into how it works, but there'll also be a link to this in the description. So let's go work with the Bitmap Maker. So we'll go over, I'll start with going over the basic layout of the controls and everything like that, and then we'll create a simple window. So I seen a design on the forums recently. It's a very easy, simple design that I should be able to do pretty quickly. But this one right here, so this one right here, what we're going to do is we're going to, let me bring that over. We'll recreate this in the Bitmap Maker, so that way you can, if you want something like this. And then, I don't know if I said it already, I should have already said it, we're going to create a button. So I've already created a design for a button. It has a default state, a hover state, and a pressed state. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that design and make it so that way it's part of a class that I can create multiple instances of it in a script. So this is the button here. Because the reason why I'm not designing the button on camera is because it can take a while to do these kind of designs. Like this is a pretty easy design, but it could still take, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes for me to design this. It's got 3 different states, right? So it's better I design something simple, show you how to use all the controls simple with a simple window, that little blue window. And then we'll take this, and then you can create your own buttons, and you just do basically the exact same thing that I'm going to do with these buttons with your buttons. You can make all kinds of different controls. I've done, like here's another button. Default, hover, pressed. And then you code this into a class, and then you can readjust its size, its colors, everything, all within your script. Alright, 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to be doing a simple window design, but you can get more complex windows. Here's a recent one. Let me see. So I'll show you the end product. So this is all custom. The buttons are custom. Radio buttons are custom. The window design's custom. Everything. Right? So this here, that window was designed in here. The button itself, I don't know which one it is. Is it this one? Nope. Definitely not. No, that's another design. Let me see. Yeah, this one. Actually, I think I released this button as a class. Yeah, I think I recently released this one as a class. So this class is available on my channel. Like, I took these already and I've coded them so that way you can use them in scripts. But we're going to be looking at how you can create your own in this video. So these buttons here are actually these buttons here. Alright, so let's get into it. Okay, when you start out, you're going to want to create a canvas. So that's the bitmap part, an area that we want to draw graphics to. So usually you're going to have an idea of how big you want to make it. So in this one, I'm going to create a window that's about 250 pixels by 250 pixels. I'm going to set the smoothing to 4. Smoothing is the anti-aliasing. I can't really tell you much about it. Your best bet is to just once we create it, once we create this bitmap, it's going to unlock, add a bunch of controls to here. Through here, I can adjust the smoothing when I'm creating all my elements. So basically, if you are creating things with curves, like a circle or an ellipse or something like that, you want to set the smoothing to a value of 2 or 4. Anything else you can do like 3 or 1. Your best bet is to add some elements. This will populate once I add the bitmap. Add some new things to it. See what the smoothing does to it. So here's my bitmap. I can click on it. I can click anywhere on it and drag it around. Once I created it, it created this. I can unlock it and now I can move the bitmap around. It's easy enough just to do it like this, but if I need to, I can move it around like this. If I just press the buttons on their own, it moves everything by 1 pixel at a time. If I hold shift and press the button, it moves it by 10 at a time. I can zoom into the bitmap, zoom out, etc., etc. And then smoothing. I can adjust the smoothing. So let's add something to this. I'll fill a circle. So here I have a circle. The edges are really smooth. But if I switch this to 3, now the edges are very jagged. So let's zoom in. So I have very jagged edges. If I put that to 4, now I have smooth edges. Jagged edges. Smooth edges. Right. Okay, so that explains that. All of these control panels can be retracted by right-clicking on them, so I can have much more area to look at what I need to look at. I can redeploy them by right-clicking on them again. I can have multiple bitmaps on the screen at a time, as you've seen before with those buttons that I had. Everything is shapes and colors. So I have, these are the current options that I have available to me. Later on, I'm going to make it so that way I can actually take a bitmap that I've already created and add it to another bitmap. So for example, let's say I'm creating a window here. Maybe I want to add one of those buttons onto this so that way I can see what it'll look like when I code it later on. So I can add the bitmap for that button onto this, and then when I export it, before I export it, I can remove that button just so that way I can play around with the spacing. It'll make design a little bit easier. Another thing will be adding pictures, PNGs, etc., etc. So that way, if you're trying to recreate something, you can put the image on and go from there. Okay, so to start drawing, all we need to do is select the shape that we want. Typically, you're going to want to start with a fill rectangle and fill the background, because this black doesn't actually exist. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this whole area. So I'm going to select fill rectangle from the drop down list and then add it. Once it gets added to this list view, list box, and the order that it gets added is the top of the the top of the list is the oldest thing, so this is how everything gets drawn. So the things that are higher up on the list get drawn first, the things that are lower on the list get drawn after. So if I want, I can have things overlap. Let me change the color. Don't worry, I'll go over the controls I just went in a second. But right now, the circle gets drawn second, so it gets drawn on top of the rectangle. If I want, though, I can move the elements up or down the queue. So I select the one that I want, and then I can move it up. So now the circle gets drawn first, and then the rectangle gets drawn on top of it. So that's the up-down. Once you get into really complex bitmaps, I think I was actually going to just show you something before. I don't know if I drew it. I said, here, this is the window, but then I don't think I actually did it. So I designed that pixel predator window in this. So I'll give it a second to load. If I want it to load faster, I can turn off auto draw, and now it'll do it a lot quicker. My recording software is really slowing things down, because usually this would be a lot faster. But turning off the auto draw while it's building it does definitely speed it up either way. When it's finished drawing, when it's finished adding all the elements, I can turn auto draw back on and draw. So when I get to this one's a pretty simple window, but if it had like 100 more things added to it, every single time I move something or change its color, it redraws everything. There's some optimization that I'll adjust later. It's a lot more complicated than just simply having something drawn, like have all the old stuff stay drawn and then just the new stuff gets drawn each frame. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I haven't had the desire to go through the code yet to figure out a good way of optimizing how it draws things. But when you get into hundreds and hundreds of elements added, every single time I move something or change its color, its position, it has to redraw. So it'll flicker, and moving things by using the buttons and that, there's a little bit of a delay. So I can't just go click, 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 click. It's like click, it has to redraw. Click, it has to redraw. So what I can do is, if I'm just doing some quick positioning around things, what I can do is I can turn off auto draw, move the thing around a little bit, and then force it to update the window, and then move it a little bit, force it to update the window, if it gets a little bit tedious like that. Most of the time you're just going to leave auto draw on. Alright, so let me get rid of this window. Alright, so we're on to this window. Actually, let me just start fresh. So I have my bitmap, I have my list of things that I can do. When you first start out, the best thing you can do is just add a couple of things. Move its position. Just like with this one, this control panel over here, these ones, if you do the buttons without, just on its own, it's 1 pixel at a time. 1 pixel at a time. If you hold shift, it's 10 pixels at a time. There's also some new hotkeys where if you use the arrow keys, you can move it around. So I don't have the combinations all memorized, but it's the arrow keys plus shift, the arrow keys plus control, arrow keys plus shift and control, arrow keys and alt, and arrow keys and windows. Just play around with it. Different elements have different things that they do when you use the arrow keys with the hotkeys. I don't have them memorized. Just play around with it. It's just arrow keys, shift, arrow keys with shift, or arrow keys with control, or arrow keys with shift and control, or arrow keys with the Windows key, or arrow keys with alt, and just, it's those combinations. Find out the ones that work. In other words, just use this. So just add a couple of controls, or different elements, and see what they do. So for the rounded one, it has this radius, so this is the outline, right? See what happens when you change it. Play around with it, explore. Play around with the different brushes that are available. There's 4 different brushes that are available. A normal brush, which just has a plain color. A hatch brush, which has these hatch patterns. There's 53 different patterns ranging from 0 to 52. Go through them all, see which ones you like. You can have 2 different colors with them, etc., etc. Line brush, same thing. Just play around with it, see what you like. Explore. Back to the control panel over here. So I talked about the queue, or the order that it gets drawn. Auto draw, force draw, moving it up and down the stack. Unlock unlocks this button just to remove the element. So if I don't want to keep this, if I don't want this here anymore, I can just remove it and it's gone. And then be safe, make sure to lock it again so you don't accidentally hit remove. If at any time I create something that I want to duplicate, so let's say I create a pie. Right? If I want to duplicate this, all I have to do is just hit clone, and that'll create a new copy of it. Sometimes it doesn't refresh its values for some reason, so just to make sure that it does, even though it's selected, just click it, and that'll if it didn't refresh its values, that'll do it. Now I have a clone that I can move around. There's also a hotkey to clone. It's Control D. Alright, so that's that. If I'm working on something and it's got really fine detail and something's in the way a little bit, what I can do is I can hide an element. Hiding an element, even though it's hidden, I can see that it's hidden by this. I added this H to it. Even though it's hidden here, when you export it, it's not going to be hidden. So the actual file, the actual text, the function that it spits out, this doesn't apply to that. This only applies while it's in the editor. Notes, when it spits out the code, so let's get an example of what the code looks like. So I'm going to take this background that I showed before, and I'm going to put that in my clipboard. If I come to my script and I paste it in, this is what it spits out. It's code. So if I was to try to draw with Gdip normally, it's all these function calls. I would have to do all of these function calls in order to recreate that window, this window. My recording software is really slowing down my computer. So this window, this is how it's created, through these function calls and positions and colors and brushes. So if you were to do it normally working with Gdip library, you would have to adjust this, run it, see what it looks like. Oh, I don't like that. Run it, see what it looks like. Oh, I don't like that. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of functions. And this one's a pretty simple window. This is only 291 lines. I've had ones that are over 1,000 lines. So about the notes, that's where I was going. Let me redraw that. Anytime I add an element, I can also associate a note with it. The notes, how they appear is if I go back to the code again, and I should have some notes in this. This is what the note looks like. So if I want to, for example, I always have something where I want to be able to move the window around. So I want to know ahead of time when I go to add my control to that to actually be able to click on it and move it around. Now, because I added this note here, I have a brush that's filling a rectangle with those coordinates, and I can use these coordinates to put a text control that allows me to attach it to a subroutine that can get executed when I click on it. Likewise with the minimize button and the close button. So that's the purpose of notes. This is what a note looks like when you add it. This is what it looks like in the code. When you minimize the window, because it's using a bit belt, to draw all these backgrounds, they disappear. To get them back again, just do anything. Pretty much do anything. Right click on a tab and it'll redraw. I'm not sure if force draw, maybe force draw works too. Let me see. I don't think force draw might not work. Let me see. If I hit draw, yeah, draw. If I hit draw, there, it'll redraw it. So it's not gone, it just disappeared. Let's go back into, I'll start with a fresh bitmap and we'll continue on. So I think from here, what I'll do is I'm going to recreate that window, and that'll give you a sense of what I'm doing. Every single thing that I have, every element, when it's created, everything has a default. To adjust those defaults, go to the Defaults tab, and you can adjust every single default. So the width so right now I have set the default for the width to be 50 pixels and the height to be 50 pixels. Its X position to be 10 pixels and its Y position to be 10 pixels. If I don't like those, no problem. Now it comes with the 100. Any changes that I make like this, without doing anything else, affect this session. If I want them to apply to every single session, like when I reload this program again, just go here, hit save, and it'll save it to a file, and then every time this program's loaded, it'll load all these defaults for you. You can do set defaults for everything. The text that shows up when you create a new text control, the font that it creates. I don't know if I talked about font, but let's actually talk about that right now before I forget. The font that you select in this, because this is using the Gdip library, if you're sharing this with somebody else, if they don't have the font that you specified, then no text will show up for them. There's a couple of ways around this. One is you can ahead of time let the person know these are the fonts that are available that I'm using in this. If you don't have them, Google them and download the font. It takes 2 seconds. Another way is you can programmatically have it so that way, I'm not gonna do this in the video, but it's easy enough to look up. You can have in your script, you can have it look to see if the person has a particular font, and if it doesn't, you can have it pop up a message box that says that they don't have the font to go download it, or you can have it check if they have the font, and if they don't have that font, you can change the default font that you're using to some other font. So if you're using a font that not many people might have, you can have it set up so that way if it detects that they don't have that font, it'll revert to some other font like Arial, which pretty much I think everyone has Arial, right? But the problem with that is different fonts, they have different spacing, so you have to anticipate that and plan for that. The best way is just use a font. The best way is to use a font that you know that people are going to have, or two, make sure you include a message saying if you don't have this font, you're going to have to download it. It takes like no time at all. You Google search the font, you go to the page, you select it, you download it, it's on your computer, you can use it forever now. Okay, let's get rid of this shit. Okay, we're just going to go into creating that window now. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get that color, that blue color. So I'm going to use my color picker, and I am going to pull up this window, and I'm going to get this blue color. Now that blue color has been added to my clipboard. So I'm going to create a draw rectangle, which draws an outline of a rectangle rather than filling it in. And it starts with its defaults. I'm going to change the color to that color I just got, and I'm going to change its thickness to about 3 pixels. I'm going to go ahead and move it into position. To fill the border of my window. I'm not going to fill in the background. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to use the normal GUI's background to fill that part in. So that way I can add normal controls and they'll look exactly the way I want them to. Let me look at that design again. Okay, so it's got a little rectangle down there. This looks like it's a little bit too thick, so maybe I'll reduce this down to 2 pixels. And I have to reposition it. Okay, I think that's good enough. Now I'm going to add a rectangle. I'm going to make its height, I don't know what its height is, 25 pixels. If I wanted to, I would have that thing over in the next window, so that way I could look at it, but I'm just going freehand with this. I just picked that window because it's easy to reproduce. I can manually type in the color here and the alpha here, but I can also, just like with my color picker, this get color option, I can also do that with this. So I can select this, and now I can go and open up that thing here, and I can hover over the color, press Control, and now when I come back, that'll be updated. So let me see, where's that bitmap? There it is. So it updated the color for me. I need a rectangle, I think. Rectangle right there, same color. So fill rectangle. About 20 pixels by 20 pixels. And I'm going to do it that same color. Let's see, what has he got on it? He has FS. Well, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to add text. And my text is going to just say HB. I'm going to change the font to COUI. And then I'm going to position it. What color was his text? It's white. So I'm going to use my color picker. Come here. Oh, my computer's running really slow right now. And there we go. Just adjust its position. There we go. HB. What else do we got? We got drag and drop here. I don't know what font that is, so I'm just going to use Arial. Oops. Oh well, I changed that one to Arial, but whatever. It's not important. I'm going to add a new text control. I'm going to center it. I know that the size of my window is 250 by 250, so I'm going to set this to be, it's the position of my text to make sure I get it centered, is I'm going to set it to 0 and 250. The height oops, 250. The height I'm not concerned about. I can adjust that very easily just by using this. The center is a little bit harder. And I think that was white. I'm going to get rid of the bold option. For the options for the text, it has to be, they're case sensitive. So for bold, it's B, uppercase B, OLD. For underline, it's uppercase U, underline, etc., etc. Strike through, etc. So they are case sensitive. Make sure. And what did he say? He had drag and drop here. Yes. I don't know my fonts, so I don't know what I should use. I would normally pull up like a paint program or something like that and look through the fonts that they have. I used to have a script that had the fonts for me, but my computer crashed about a year ago and I lost everything. So whatever. I'm going to do white. Oops. That looks a little bit too big. Drag and drop here. So yeah, so it's a little bit narrower font. I don't know what it would be. Maybe, I think there's a, yeah, I don't have that font. I think there is an Arial Narrow, but I don't have that. Yeah, whatever. I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned. Let's see what else we got. File Scrambler. And that looks to be, let me get the color of that. Oh, it didn't stick. Here, let me make sure I'm getting the right color. There. Yes. I see this person picks his colors just like me. It's 77777. Oh, sorry, this one's white. Which one? Yeah, to add a text. This one's 7777. And I'm going to position it centered, so it's x0 width 250. I'll move it up. Once again, I'm not using the right font, but whatever. Point is made. Looks like it's about centered with that. So I'm going to move this over to try to get it centered with the center of my box. And then I'm going to go back to 0. Alright, get rid of the bold. Wait. What? Oh, okay, this one here. I can get rid of the bold. That'll help. There we go. That looks a little bit more like it was. Select. And now I'm going to add another text. This is, I'm not sure if he's using a font or not, like if he's using characters. What I'm going to do is, instead of using a character, I could just do an X and a line. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to draw a line. With the line control, it doesn't have a width and a height. Instead, it has a starting position and an ending position. So it's difficult for you to see it right now. So let me spread this out, and then I'll make this thicker. So there. So I can adjust the first position, which is this side, and I can also adjust the other side. And there's the arrow keys move both at the same time. Shift does 10 at a time. Control does Control and the arrow key does this side. And Windows and the arrow keys does this side. So I'm going to try to make an X. Which is probably a bad idea because it's probably going to take me 5 minutes to do it. And this was 777777. Whatever. I don't really like it. I can play around with it for 5 minutes if I want, but whatever. Good enough. I think you get the idea. You know what? I'm actually just going to use text. I don't like the way that looks. I'm just going to use text. If I want to spend a couple of minutes working on it, no problem, but I don't want to spend a couple of minutes working on it. what I'm going to do is, because I want to add this to my code, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fill a rectangle. I'm going to fill a rectangle, and I'm going to make it white. I'm going to move it all the way up the stack. Alright, and I'm going to use this to get the positions of where I want my controls to be afterwards. This will make it a little bit easier for adding my move window and things like that. So there. And I'm going to make it the same color that my GUI. By default, the GUI, I think it's F0, F0, F0. So that color will blend in right with my background of my GUI, so you won't even notice that that's there. It's all going to be white. I'm going to do the same thing with the X position. But before I do that, which one was that? I think this is it. Yes. So I'm going to add here, I'm going to add a note that says move window. Then I'm going to come back here, move this up the stack. And continue moving it over here. Good enough. I'm going to make it the same that my GUI is going to be. Oh, and I need to add a note that says this is going to be close. I'm going to clone this, and that's going to put it right at the bottom of my stack, so I need to move it up. Good enough. And now I can move it over, and this is going to be minimize. And I can just add text. I'll just take my other text, the X text, clone that. This is what I was talking about. Sometimes when you clone it, it doesn't update, but if I click on this, it'll update. Or if I do any other action, mostly, it'll update. But that's what I was talking about. Okay. Is there anything else that this window has? File script. Oh. Derp. Good enough. Okay, I think I have everything I need. I do have everything I need, right? Drag and drop here, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to save this. I don't know if I said this or not, but when you save, if you're working on a project, it's once you save something, the next time you go to save it, give it a new don't save it as the same file, because this is an alpha project, and also because see how difficult it can be to work with these kind of things here. It's a good idea that you have different stages of your development saved as their own file, so that way if you decide, oh, you know what, I don't like these elements here, you can just go back to your earlier copy and all those things are already gone for you. Also, you can create inner windows. Like this could be the main part, and then if I have other stuff that's going on in the middle of it, I can have those. As separate bitmaps that I would add in. So I think there is one more thing that I didn't add, which is a plus sign. But I'm not gonna add the plus sign because I want to be able to use this GUI to add other controls to it, like as if it was just a window I'm designing. So I'm not gonna add the plus sign in. you know it's easy to add that plus sign. It's fill a rectangle. Right? Just make a plus sign. If I don't want the sharp edges at the top, get rid of that and do a rounded rectangle. And I think that color will be, let's say, E0, 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 which would make it just a little bit darker than the normal background window. And I can make my plus sign. But we're not going to do that. So here's my window. I'm going to save it. I'm going to call this and I'm going to give it a number 1 at the end. When I start saving it, the progress bar will fill up. When it's done, it'll beep twice and I'll get this little message down here that says it's done. Don't do anything while it's saving. Bigger bitmaps take longer. Okay, it's done. Now that it's done, I can go to load, select the one that I just added right there, and I can put that into my clipboard. But before I do that, what we're going to do is we're going to do that setup. So I'm going to, that tool I mentioned at the beginning, the window maker, I'm going to come here, I'm going to clip full new script, paste, clip new window, paste, and we are done. Now I'm going to go to the Bitmap Maker, select clipboard, and I'm going to come into my script and I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to give it a new name. It spits out the function with this default name, HB Bitmap Maker. Change it to whatever you want. Or window background. Window background. Take that. Change the bitmap. Change the options. That's what's going to appear down there. Always on top, minus caption, minus DPI scaling. The window 1. The width and height are 250. And I can see that the first line is the width and height of my bitmap. The X position and Y position of where I want to draw that image, so I want it to be at 0, 0. And that's it. These ones here I'm going to use in a second, so I'll put them up here. I'm going to get rid of that, get rid of that. And now I need the position for move window, minimize window, and close window. So right here I have all that information because I put notes. So I'm going to dump this here for a minute. And to move window, the position is going to be X50, Y5, width 150, height 30. For the close window, it is 225, 8, 2020. For the background on my window, I want it to be F0, 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 which is actually the default. So I can get rid of that line because I'm just going to be using the default. Font, I definitely do not want white text on that, so I'll do black. Size 8. So I did the GUI closed. Now I'll do the. This is going to be the same. To 205. And now I can get rid of this. Alright, now if I run it, here we go. I have my window. Minimize, close. Where did I? Oh, I closed it. There. And now I can go, because I left the center just using the normal GUI, I can now come in here and maybe it's not F0, F0, F0. I thought it was. Let me see. Yeah, it's F0, F0, F0. Okay. So now I can just come in here and start adding in my regular controls. $50, 150. I don't like the normal button, so I'll change that in a second. I got some button. And I remove the theme. There we go. I have some button. There we go. Whatever. Alright, now let's get rid of all of this and start from scratch with creating a button class. But before I do that, I need a cigarette because I am a smoker, and because the recording software I'm using doesn't have a pause button, and I'm not going to spend 2 hours in editing after I spent 2 hours creating this video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the background color to red, and the next time just fast forward the video until you no longer see a red background, and that's when I'm back. See you in a couple minutes. Alrighty, I am back. Okay, on with the main show. This is where we're going to go and create a class for buttons. So before we do that, I'm going to point out that what we're going to be doing is not taking this image and stretching it. The point isn't to create a PNG basically and then stretch it and skew it and whatever, because that'll look horrible. To give an example, what we can do is we can take this. If we take this window and how can I do that? I don't know if I can do that here. But anyways, if you take a PNG and you stretch it and whatever, it's not the same. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be more like vectorizing it. It's not quite vectors, but we're going to be vectorizing buttons. So when you design a button, you have to keep in mind what things is it going to be possible for you to vectorize those coordinates? So to give an example, let's have a look at some designs that would work. And a design of something that wouldn't work. Okay, so here is a checkbox. No, that's the radio. Let me see if I can find my switch. Okay. This control here is not designed to be scaled. It is possible that this could be scaled, but I'd have to scale it in units. So it could be, if I scaled, I could double its size, I could triple its size, but I can't do it 1.5 times, because anything that is 1 pixel thick, you can't draw things 1.5 pixels thick. If you were to take this as an image, a PNG, and then paste it and stretch it and whatever, it'll look horrible. It'll look absolutely horrible. So this is designed to be exactly this size. Every single time I use it, it has to be this size. But with the buttons, I design them in a way so that way they can be, so everything on it that I need to adjust for the size, the width, the height, all the elements that are comprise this button, they're all things that I can scale. Oops. Everything on them. So you have to keep that in mind. Like a rectangle, no problem. You can scale that. You can adjust its width, its height, its starting position, ending position, whatever you want. You can, for a brush, you can have a starting position, ending position, no problem. I don't think I did anything about brushes. Like we didn't do any. So I'm going to add a little bitmap. I think I went into the colors and whatever, the line brush. But anyways, I'm going to create a rectangle just to make it quick. Oops, let me activate, add a rectangle. Just in case I forgot this. I can select any color I want. Yes. This color. I can set its position wherever I want to do this line brush by using this and following the instructions on the tooltip. I don't know if I covered that, but I just want to make sure I covered that. So anyways, so rectangle, no problem. Simple designs like this, they can get kind of complex. Like, let me see. I don't think I have anything that's like really complex. But yeah, they're very simple buttons. It's just fill a rectangle, fill a rounded rectangle, rounded rectangle, rounded rectangle, rounded rectangle, and that. And it's just layers. So if I remove all the layers, and then zoom in on it, all right, and then come back and unhide it. So it's got a background, and then it has this rounded rectangle there, and then it's got another rounded rectangle that sits inside of it. and then another rounded rectangle that's got a little bit of a gradient on it, sitting on top of that. And then another rounded rectangle sitting on top of that. And then some text on top of that. Right? It's very, very simple, but if you do it well, it looks really good. And we can scale this with code, so that way we're not stretching it. We're not going to be stretching our class. Our class isn't about taking an image and stretching it, making it all look all nasty. We're going to take this exact design, or well, we're going to take the white button, and we're going to, regardless of whatever size it is here, we can make it any size we want, and it's going to look virtually identical. So let me clear this, and let's get ourselves set up. So before I start pasting in the code for those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all this. Everything from now on, I'm going to leave a link to the paste. So I'm going to create a paste bin post after this video is done, and all the code that I'm going to be typing now is going to be in a paste. So ideally, I already posted a class, a button class. So if you're just looking to get a button class that's already created, then you don't need to do this. This is to show you how to do it from scratch yourself, so that way you can design your own buttons and do this. So the first thing I need is I need to have the Gdip library. So I'm going to use my tool. Like I said, there will be a link to this in the description. And I'm going to clip the Gdip library. Now I do have a reduced version of Gdip library, but I don't have a script available right now that has it in it, so I'm just going to use the full library. I'm going to go down 100 lines or so, and I'm just going to paste it in. So now I have the full Gdip library, or Gdip all, which is 32-bit and 64-bit compatible library. And it's pasted at the bottom of my script, so it's out of the way. If you know how to include a library, go ahead and do that. Like just use include at the top of your script. Okay, so I have the library in. I'm going to set up some things about my script. I'm going to do single instance. Make sure my mic's on. Yeah, okay. Because I'm not re-recording. I've already done this 3 times now. This is the last time. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. For testing purposes, I'm going to add in GUI context menu. Just means I can right click on the window to close it, and I'm going to add in an emergency exit hotkey. And this is all going to exit the app. At the top of my script, I'm going to set the batch lines to -1. This will make the script run faster. And I'm going to start up Gdip. So if I call up the tool, if I expand it out by right clicking on the window, I get this extra thing where I can actually type stuff in. So it's Gdip_startup, and it gives me highlights. Is it startup? There we go. Gdip startup. I'm going to clip the prototype for this function because I already have the function in my script. I just want the function call for it. And I'm going to paste that right there. So now Gdip is working in my script, so I can use the Gdip functions. Next I'm going to create a little window. Oh. I'm going to make it always on top. And I'm just going to leave it that default. I'm going to create a I'm going to make the background color. I'm going to make it, I'll start with a really light color. So I'll do EE. I'm going to change the font. Color, I'm going to do, I guess, black for now. And size 10, whatever. I'm going to show a window. I'll make it, I'm going to get it so that way it sits over somewhere over here. So I'm going to position it, I'm going to do it as an expression, and then quotes with X. I'm going to do it the built-in variable a screen width. Screen width. I'm going to make the window 400 pixels. No, I'll do it 350. So I'm going to do, I'll move it, I'll put the position of the window a screen width minus the width of the window minus 50 pixels. So I'll do it 400. The Y position, I'll do about 100 pixels down. And, oh, I guess I don't need that. 100. I'll add in that. The width, 350. Height, 350. Whatever. I'll call the window button class. Okay, what do we have? So let's see what we have. I have an error. Line 6. Oh, this should be color. Okay, so I have that little window sitting over there, and if I right click on it, it should close it. Alright, time to build the class. So right here, I'm going to type out class, and then what do I want to call this class? I'm just going to call it new button type. Call your class whatever you want to call it. When I create a new instance of this class, I want it to go to basically a constructor function or a constructor method. To do that, there's this built-in one that automatically gets called if you every time you create a new instance. If it's in your script or in your class, it's new. So it's 2 underscores. You have to make sure it's exact the same. 2 underscores and then the word new. Open and close parentheses and then your French braces. So now when I create a new button up here, it's automatically going to call up this method. What do I want my button to have? Well, I know that I want to position my button on my graphical user interface, so I know it's going to need to have an X position. And I'm going to do, to make things easier for me when I'm creating new instances of this button, in this constructor, the arguments that I'm going to be passing it, the parameters, I'm going to set everything so that way it's a variable colon equals a value. And every single one is going to have a predetermined value. This way also, when I go to create my first new button, I can just copy this whole line, paste it up here, and all those values will be, it'll tell me exactly what each of those parameters are. So it's going to be x colon equals some value. I'll default it to 10, comma. Y colon equals, I'll do it to 10 for default. Width colon equals, the button has a default width, but I'm not going to care about that because we're going to make it scalable, so the default doesn't really matter. I'm going to make it default to 100. Height, I'm going to make it default to 30. Next, I'm going to say what window do I want to attach this button to. So I'm going to create a variable called window, and I'm going to set it to equal. By default, I'm going to have it set to 1, which is typically the first GUI that I create. But if you're using a different GUI name, then when you create your new button, you would change that. But I'm going to have it default to 1. What label do I want to attach it to? And I'm not going to have it default to anything. Next, I'm going to do what text do I want to appear on my button. So I'm going to create text variable, and I'm going to have it default to the word button. Next, I am going to window label text. Our button, it's a rectangle, but the button is a rounded rectangle, or it's often going to have a rounded rectangle. So let's bring up that button that I'm going to be using. All right, so you can, I don't know if you can see. Well, let me zoom in. But I have this white around here and then white up at the top corner there and there. That is the background. So that's not actually the button. It's the background. So I need that when I need to be able to code it so that way that color blends in with my whatever color I make my GUI. So that's one thing I need. But I don't want that yet. I don't want that yet. I have text. I'm going to do font. What font do I want to use for my text? I'm going to default it to Arial. What font size do I want to use? This I'm going to include also the additional options. So if I want to have it bold or strike through or underline, this is where I would also include those. So I'm going to have it default to 10 and bold. I'm going to make the button have two different colors. The text have two different colors. So the first color is going to be the text on top, and then I'm going to have another text that's underneath it slightly offset, either above or below it. So I'm going to do font color top equals I don't like having to type out 0xff00 blah 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 every time. So what I'm going to do is when I go into the actually attaching these to the object in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that part automatically. So in here all I have to do is type in the color. So default I'm going to have it set to black. The font color is black. I also want to have the bottom color, so font. And of course your button is going to be different, so the options that you're going to be using are different. Like for me, the color of the button that I have, I'm not going to be changing the actual color of the button, but that is something that I can do. I had released a button class about a week ago, and I used that same button in that Pixel Predator program. So if you check out the differences between the class, I'm pretty sure I discussed during that video on how to use the class. I discussed how to actually go about changing the color. But if you want another demonstration of it, it's the exact same button that I released is the same button that I used for the Pixel Predator program, which is also on the channel. So if you look at the code and check out the differences of the class, that's how that colored worked. But I'm not going to do that here. I'll point it out when we get into it. I'll point it out like, okay, this is where I can make that kind of adjustment, but I'm not actually going to be doing it for this class because the button is the way I want it. Font color top, font color bottom. If you're only going to be having one color for your font, if you're not going to have the multiple layers, then you only need one. So you could just use font color. I'm going to do the bottom white. What else do I want? Let me have a look at my button. Background color and roundness. I think that might be it. I might think of some other things that I want to add, but for now I think that's it. So I'm going to do button color, no, button background color colon equals I'm gonna do, I think like I said, the default background for GUI is F0 F0 F0, so that's why I'm just gonna set the default to. And the last one thing I'm going to add is how round, so that I can adjust how round I want the button to be by adjusting the corners. So I'm going to create a variable called roundness, because I'm original like that. Roundness, and I'm going to default it to 2. That's usually what I like about 2, round. Now that I have all of those, I'm going to take those and attach them to my object. So I'm going to do this dot x colon equals x. This dot y colon equals whatever I pass as y. This dot width equals whatever I pass as the width. This dot height equals whatever I pass it as the height. Damn autocomplete. This dot window colon equals window. So whatever I passed it as the window's name. The label, no. This dot label equals the label I passed to it. This dot text, whatever I passed as text. This dot font colon equals whatever I passed as the font. This dot font color top equals, remember how I said I don't want to have to type out 0xff every single time. So here I'm going to do in quotes, I'm going to do 0xff close quotes and then the variable font color top. I'm going to duplicate this just because it's pretty much the same word. And I'm just going to do bottom, bottom. Okay, what else do I have? I have button background, yeah, button background color. And the last one is roundness. Okay, I might need to add some things after, but for the moment I think I'm okay. The next thing I want to do is I want to create a control. So I'm going to use a picture control and draw my button to that picture control. So that's the next thing I want to do, is I want to add that. And it's going to act as a trigger. I usually use trigger as the word. I could say add picture or whatever, but I'm going to create a method, which is basically just a function within the object. If you're not familiar, it's just a function within this object. So I'm going to create a function within this object, which is called a method, that I'm going to call create trigger. That's what I always pretty much use. Create trigger, and in here what I am going to do is I'm going to GUI, then I'm going to make this needs to be an expression, so I'm going to use a percent mark, and I'm going to say this dot window, so that way I know that this control is getting added to the window that I specified. This window, and then in quotes I need to put colon, and then still within the quotes I need to do add, and then I can add my comma and do picture. I'm going to add a picture control. This is next part's going to be an expression, so I'm going to once again add a % mark, and I'm going to do in quotes the letter X, and the X position is whatever I have stored as, so that's the position that I'm going to position my picture control is whatever I passed to it. So that's this dot X. The Y position is quote space Y. Make sure you add those. Quote and then a space and then this dot Y. Quote space width and this dot width. Quote space H. Quote this dot height. In quotes space. I'm not going to associate a variable to this because variables are a pain in the ass. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to associate a variable to get the handle, and I can reuse this handle variable over and over and over and over again. So as long as you're not you see how I'm using this X, Y, width, and height, and all these things. These are generic, very generic. Variable names. Like if you're using these for variable names, they're very typically, these are going to be local variables, right? So when I create a new button, I'm going to, if up here, let's say if I had said X equals 30, as soon as I create my first button, X is going to get overridden to whatever I set X to. So don't keep that in mind, that if you're using these generic things in your script, right, make sure you use them after you've created all your buttons, or don't use generic ass names, because this structure here is going to make it, when you create your new button, really easy to see. Okay, what is the fifth, instead of counting how many commas I have and then saying, oh, okay, the fifth comma, it means that that's where I'm supposed to put in the font, right? No, we're just going to use create a variable that's already built right into it, and then if I have 10 buttons, rather than having, what I can do is I can just use font over and over again. I don't actually have to type in that it equals anything, right? Which we'll go into when we get finished with the class. So we're gonna be using these variables for our buttons. So if you want to use them in your script, hey, that's not a problem. Just make sure you understand that the part that the buttons being created, they're getting overridden. Likewise, if you use a generic thing for a handle for a control, like hwind equals hwind, then it's like, I don't know, that's not how you should do things. So I'm gonna do that here, because you shouldn't be doing that, and if you are doing it, it should only be a temporary variable that you're immediately getting rid of anyways. So I'm just going to do hwind, HWND equals HWND. Very simple. I could change it to something that you're never going to use, but why? What's the point? If you're using handle, if you're using HWND as your actual handle, then I'm sorry, you're a dumbass. So anybody who uses it, if you create a class and share it with somebody and they're dumb enough to actually, and you do it exactly like I'm doing, and they're dumb enough to use HWND as their handle variable, then they're a dumbass. If you're going to use that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with using it, but that's a temporary variable. HWND, and then there's an option. I'm not going to be adding a PNG, so instead I'm going to be injecting into, I'm going to be setting the image directly through code. So there's a code, a hexadecimal code that I need, which is 0xe. And this way I can directly use the handle to the bitmap and put it directly into this picture control. And I think XY width height, I think that is it. Now that I've created that temporary handle variable, now I'm gonna take it from being a temporary variable and put it into my permanent thing. So I'm gonna say that this dot HWND equals HWND. And now, even if I use that one over and over again, I still have a permanent reference to it. Right? Just HWND, it's temporary, it's gone. Poof. Okay. What else do I want? What else do I want? I'm gonna have a sip of my coffee. I need to think about this for a second. I know what I want. I know what I want. My previous button classes, when you attach a label to the button control that you create, inside of the button, you would have to add an extra function that calls up a method within the button class that actually does the triggering. I'm not doing it that way anymore. I've gone to my next evolution of creating a class, and that is to, when you click on the button, it directly goes into here, and then from here it decides whether it should go to your function or not, or your label or not. So to do that, I need to bind this picture control to a method within my class. To do that, I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna create just a little thing called bind picture control. The name I give it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to set it to equal this. I'm going to bind this dot. I'm going to bind it to a method that I'm going to create right now. So I'm going to call this create pressed. No, draw pressed. Because create I'm going to use to actually create the bitmap. Draw pressed. So when they click on the button, I'm going to have it bound to go to this spot before it actually goes to the code that you want to have executed when you press your button. So this way you don't have to add that extra function to the class, to your labels or functions anymore. So I'm going to bind it to this dot draw pressed. No, dot bind. And then in here I'm going to pass it this. Now that I've done that, I'm going to use GUI control to attach a label to that. So I'm going to do GUI control, and I'm going to do plus G to a new label, and I am going to be, what do I want here? I want the Windows handle. I mean the controls handle. So that's this dot HWND. And the last thing is, what did I call that temporary variable there, which is B, button press, button picture click, I don't know, whatever I said it was. Doesn't really matter. It's just 3 letters. And there we go. So now when I click on that button, it's just going to go right into the button, the draw pressed. Now I want to be able to sometimes use labels. Like when I click on my button, sometimes I want it to go to a label, other times I want it to go to a function. The reason why I want it to go to functions is not because I want to pass values to it or anything like that, but because I can do this. That's it. That's the reason why I want to use functions for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if there's actually anything passed. So by default there's no label attached to it. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to say if this dot label, and that's all I have to add for that. All that says is if the variable this dot label has any value at all, that means there's something in it, so go ahead and do the next step. the next step is I'm going to do a little ternary statement, and I'm going to do I'm going to say use the built-in function. I'm going to say is func. All right, and this will return whether this will return a 1 or a 0 whether or not the label that the thing that I'm using as a label is a function or not. So there's a label. There's a function. This thing knows if it's a function or not, and not just a label. So I'm going to pass it this dot label, and if it's, I'm going to ask that question: is it a function? If it is, then I am going to let me see. Is it func? Okay, so I'm going to create a function for that. Yeah. So I'm gonna. I don't know how to describe this. I'm gonna take that whatever's in this dot label, which is a string. So I'm dynamically kind of creating a function. I don't know. I don't know how to describe what I'm doing. But if it is a function, then I want whatever's in this dot label to go to that function when I call it. This dot label. Okay. Other words, if there is something in label, and if it's not a function, then it must be a label. So do I need to do this here? Do I need to do anything? Think. Alright, so if it's a function, go ahead and bind that function, or create that function with this dot label. If it's not, and it's got to be a label, I don't know if I need to do anything else. I might have to cheat. I haven't written this out too many times before. This is all new. So I think that should be good. I think that should be good. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something. We'll come back to that. We'll test it out and see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll come back to it. Okay. So that is that done. In the button pressed, we'll come back because we got to do some other things. We're going to get the bitmaps added in before we start worrying about that. But I'm going to create all the methods, the names of the methods first. So the first one is I'm going to call create default. Create default bitmap. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go get my bitmaps and then rename them. So let's do that. So I'm going to go back into my Bitmap Maker. So you should have a button by now. Alright. And I'm going to go to my buttons. I'm going to clipboard the default and paste it in. Everything's needs to be tabbed over once. Okay. And this one is going to be create default bitmap. Create default bitmap. Alright, that one's added. Next is the hover. So I'm going to clipboard that one and come back here and paste it in. I'm going to tab all of this stuff over. And this one is going to be create hover bitmap. Create hover bitmap. Okay. And then the last one is pressed. Clipboard. Okay, and this one's going to be create pressed bitmap. Okay. For the moment, I'm not going to vectorize it. Instead, I'm going to go right to where I need to change one thing. So, in order for me to use this option here, this 0xe option, where I'm directly inputting the image, setting the image to this picture control, what I need to do is I need to use the handle of a bitmap rather than the pointer to a bitmap. So this is returning a pointer to a bitmap. What I need to do instead is I need it to whatchamacallit, give me the pointer. So there's a function, if I pull up my tool, it's called create HB Bitmap. Let me expand. Create HB Bitmap from bitmap. Okay, I need this one, so I'm going to clip that prototype, shrink that down, minimize. So here I'm going to get rid of this return bitmap, and instead I'm going to say that this dot, which one is this? I need to see which one this is. Create default bitmap. So this dot default colon equals this. So I already used a generic name to name the bitmap. So I don't need to change this first thing. The second thing, I don't think I need. I do not think that I need that. Let me see what it says in the tool. Yeah, it doesn't have any options, so I don't think I need anything for that. So I'm just going to leave only one argument. Now that I've attached I've gotten the handle to the bitmap, I can delete the image. So let me see if I can find that function. So this is just going to clear up a little bit of memory. I think this one here. Gdip dispose image. And I'm going to pass it the bitmap. We'll find out really quickly if it works or not, if it's doing what I'm expecting it to do. Because if it's not the right one, goodbye image. Alright, I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go to the next one where I'm returning the bitmap. I'm going to get rid of that, and this is going to be hover bitmap. This dot hover bitmap dispose bitmap p bitmap. This one is going to be pressed. This dot pressed bitmap equals the handle from the pointer to the bitmap. Dispose. Okay. Good, good, good. Alright, I'm going to finish out writing out these methods. So I have a draw pressed. I'm going to do draw, hover, and I'm going to do draw default. Inside of the hover and the default ones are very simple, so it's only one line of code, so I can add those in right away. The draw pressed, it has a little bit of logic in it, so I'll wait a little bit before I fill out that one. But I need in order for me to attach my bitmap, in order to attach my bitmap to my picture control, I need to call up another function, and that is setImage. I don't know if it's Gdip setImage. We'll see. Let's see. Gdip setImage. No, that's image attributes. Maybe it's just setImage. Let's see. setImage. There we go. So it's looking for the handle to the control I want and the handle to the bitmap that I'm using. So I'm going to clip that prototype and I'm going to paste it in here, and the handle is going to be the handle that I gave that picture control, which is this .hwnd, and the pointer to the bitmap. So each bitmap has its own handle. This is this .hover bitmap, and then I'm just going to copy this and paste it. This is going to be default. Okay, so I have those. I still haven't vectorized anything, but let's get some other things added in. Up in here, I'm going to have it call up a couple of methods to get, like, as soon as I create the control, I'm going to call up a few methods. One is to create the trigger, and then 3 more are to create all the bitmaps, and then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to automatically have it draw the default bitmap. So let's go through that. This dot create trigger. I'm going to create the trigger. Next, I'm going to create all the bitmaps. This dot create default bitmap. I'm just going to duplicate that line and just change this to hover and this one to pressed. Alright, so it's created those bitmaps and given me the handle. Now I'm going to, just in case, sometimes, I don't know, some things they take a little while to update and blah blah blah. So I'm going to give it a couple of milliseconds, just a couple of milliseconds, to make sure everything's settled. About 20 milliseconds. That's usually what I use. Something just like that, just to make sure everything's all settled, so that way the images get drawn the way that I want them to. It probably don't need it. I think this might be, the reason why I do this might be from when I was still working with my P button classes, where things might have needed a little bit of time, but I'm just gonna, 20 milliseconds is nothing. It's nothing. You ain't gonna notice. So me putting it in there, if it does nothing, no problem. If it does something, hey, that 20 milliseconds was really worth it. Alright, now I'm going to draw the default bitmap. Let me make sure I have the right name. Just draw default. Good thing I looked. Draw default. Create, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Knock on wood, but there shouldn't be any errors. And we have an error. Line 22. Line 22. Oh, these are just garbage. It's that, I know what it is. It's just, yeah, whatever. It's garbage. I'm going to create a, just to get out of the way, I'm going to create a test label just so we can test our code afterwards. Make sure it's doing what I want it to do. And a test function. Oh, this is a function. Inside, I'm just going to have it beep. (500 Hz), 700 Hz. Okay. Alright, let's try adding a button. So, I'm going to be creating a hover function, which is a timer, that I'm gonna need to use a very specific name. So, whenever you can go ahead and use what I type, but you can give it a name that you want, because ultimately it's your buttons. Me, I'm going to create my buttons, I'm going to give them a name. I'm going to create an array called HB underscore button. And this is just going to be an empty array, and I'm going to set this to global. So that way I can pass it into a function. My hover function. So I've created this array that I'm going to use to add all my buttons. Now I'm going to create a new button. So I do HB button.push, because I'm going to push a new instance of a button onto onto my array. And in here I'm going to be pushing a new, whatever I named my class. A new button type. You know what I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to change the name of my class. It's going to be button type. I think I did 68 of them already, so this is going to be button type 69. Yeah, button type 69. I'm pretty sure I had 68 of them before. Now I'm on 69. Alright, so I'm going to pass that, and then in these parentheses here, I'm going to pass it all my arguments. So I'm just going to copy everything there. And I'm going to replace these two parentheses with that. So it's HB button dot push, open and close parentheses, and then inside it's a new button type 69, open and close parentheses with all my information inside. At the very end, I should have two parentheses closing it. Knock on wood. I'm not sure. Knock on wood. I might be missing something still. Knock on wood, this might actually draw it right now. 35. 35. Let me see. I have some syntax error probably. So let me space these out. Text equals button, font equals Arial. Oh, font size. Font size. Did I even do? Okay, yeah. Font size colon equals. Okay, so I'm just going to add that in. This dot font size colon equals font size. Alright, now I need to take that, and I'm doing right from the parentheses up to the next, from the comma to the next comma spot. And that goes right, oh yes. No, okay, never mind. Font size. Let me make sure. Font size, font, then font size. Font, then font size. Okay. Knock on wood. And there we go. I have my button. But it doesn't do anything yet. But I have a button. And it's got a width. Now right now, I'm going to change the background color. To make this a little bit easier for me to do some testing and everything, what I'm going to do is this variable here that I have that's called button background color. I'm going to take this. I'm going to get rid of the value at the end of it. So it's always just going to be whatever that value is. If I set it somewhere else, it's always going to use that. And I'm going to set it right here. So I'm going to put GUI comma, GUI color comma, and then quote, and I'm going to paste in that variable button background color, and here I'm going to set whatever color I want. So let's see what it looks like at a darker background. Just because I'm going to be probably using characters after sooner or later, so I'm going to do it like that. So there. I can see my outline around my button. And what happens if I change this? Nothing. Absolutely nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens because we haven't vectorized it yet, which is what we're going to do as soon as I get the hover function working. And I'm going to do the hover function as soon as I come back from a cigarette. So once again, I'm going to pop this up. I'm going to change its background color. And when you don't see red anymore, that means I'm back. Alrighty, alrighty. Okay, we are back. I'll give everyone a second. Alright, okay, next thing we're going to do is we are going to create the hover function. So that way when we mouse over our button, it switches images between its default state and its hover state. To do that, I'm going to use a timer. Sooner or later, I'll get into Windows messages to do it. But I played around with Windows messages to do it like a year ago or so. And just certain things there was bugs with it, like it just didn't work the way that I wanted it to, and it made sense that it didn't work the way I wanted it to, so I ended up having to use two things to do it, and blah blah blah. Using a timer, it works perfectly. I have never had any problems with using a timer, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use a timer. And the good thing with using the timer is you can adjust it. So the switching between the hover state, even if it takes like 200, 300 milliseconds, it's barely noticeable. So if you don't want to put too much strain on your system just for dealing with the hover function, you just extend the amount of time in between each time it calls up this function. So I am going to call it HB hover function. Now it's important that you're consistent with your names. You can use the same name that I'm using, and the reason why it needs to be consistent is because inside of our class we're also going to refer to this this function. We need to refer to it by name in our pressed method to turn it on and off, which will become more clear when we get there. But I'm going to call it HB hover function. And I'm going to set it to, I usually do about, okay there, I thought my mouse died, 50 milliseconds. But 100 milliseconds is usually good. You know, the way you can check is just run your script after you have it going and see if there's too much of a delay between when you mouse over and it changes states. 50 milliseconds is like, you're not even going to notice it. Alright, so now I'm going to do this as a function. The reason I'm going to do this as a function is so that way I can use static variables in it, rather than having a label where I can't use static variables. So create a function. Inside the function, I'm going to create two static variables. One is going to swap values between to let me know whether, or let the program know whether it's currently hovering over a control or if it's not hovering over a control. So I'm going to do static, and I'm going to call it hover on. And I'm just going to leave it, I don't need to put a value in it yet, so it's basically going to start with 0. The other static variable I'm going to use is, I'm going to call it index. And what it's going to do is, as it's searching for if it's hovering over a control or not, if it matches up, if it says, yeah, I am hovering over a control, because I've set up my buttons to be an array, I'm going to loop through it, and it's going to be the index. So it's going to go through a index equals 1, a index equals 2, button equals 1, button equals 2, etc., etc. When it matches it, I'm going to take that value for the index, or a index, and I'm going to put it into the static variable index. So that way, then I can start using that to match something else. You'll see it as I type it out. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the control that my mouse is currently over. To do that, I'm going to use the mouse get position command. And I'm looking for the output variable control. So it's X, Y, window, this one. I'm going to create a variable called control, CTRL. And I'm going to have it set it to the second option, option number 2, which will give me the, it's going to give me the handle. It's going to give me the handle of the control. I think it's going to give me the handle of the control. Yeah, it's going to give me the handle of the control. Then I just need to do a check. I'm going to do if I'm not currently hovering over anything, so if not hover on, so if the value of hover on is still 0, which it starts as, if it's 0 or no value at all, okay, yes, and I'll add some space. I don't usually add space there, but I'll add some space there just so that way you can see what's going on. I have an exclamation point, hover on, ampersand, ampersand, and if there's a value in the variable control. So if it's currently hovering over control, I'm not sure if maybe it's always hovering over it, but I'm just going to add this in just in case. Maybe sometimes it's not, so maybe it can skip this extra bit of logic or skip this extra little bit, be a little bit friendlier on your computer. This takes almost no time at all, but you know, there is some time. It is a millisecond, half a millisecond. So if I can avoid having to loop through my buttons, why not? Inside of here, what I'm going to do is, now that I've determined that there is a value in the variable control and that I'm not currently hovering over anything, I'm going to loop over all my buttons. And this is where it goes back to name, that you have to be consistent with the name that you name your button. Whatever you name it, it always has to be that name. Like if I use this in another script, I can change this name, and then I can come in here and recode it with the new name. But I can just use the same name over and over and over again in every script. Every single time I make buttons, it's always going to be an array called HB button. It's always going to be looking for HB, searching through the HB button array. But you can use whatever you want. Just be consistent with it and make sure you use it to declare your array. Make all your buttons part of it, and in here you're going to be searching through that array. So I'm going to say I'm going to loop. I'm going to loop over the length of my array. So HB button dot length, and I'm going to test each and every single button in my loop to see if it matches, if the handle of my button matches the handle that I got that's under my cursor. So I'm going to say if CTRL, the variable CTRL equals HB button, the built-in variable a index is the index I'm looking at. So as it loops through, it'll be button 1, then button 2, button 3, button 4, button 5, and the key that I'm looking at is the handle, HWND. So if the control that's under my control matches up with one of the handles of my buttons, that means we have a match. If that's the case, if they match, then what I am going to do is I am going to draw my button hovered. So I need to call the method to draw my button hovered. So it's HB button, because that's the array for my button, the current index dot draw hover. Now that I have that, I'll condense my code a little bit. Like there's a couple of these open and close braces that I don't need, but for the moment I'll type it all out on its own line. The next thing I'm going to do is, because it's drawn hover, the variable hover on now needs a new value. It needs to say, yeah, I am hovering over something. So that variable hover underscore on now gets set with a value of 1. That variable index gets set to the value that is in A index. So however many buttons that I got through before it got it, that's what the index is. And then I can break out. So if it's the first button in my, if I have 20 buttons and it matches on the first button, it doesn't have to loop through the rest because it's already matched, so it can break out of the loop. I think that is it. Yeah, I think that's it. So we have a match. So that's it for there. Now what I'm going to do is, because this is taking up so much space, I'm going to condense this down. I can put everything here on one line, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this, add a comma, and that fits there. I'm going to take this, add a comma, and that fits there. I'm going to take this, add a comma, and that fits there. So it's all in one line. Now I can get rid of this brace here, and I can get rid of this brace here. We're down one line. This here, this loop, there's only one action in the loop, because this line here isn't part of the loop, it's part of this if statement. I can get rid of this. This if statement here, if it's true, there's only one thing it needs to do, and that is enter into this loop. So that's only one line of code, so I can get rid of this. And there we go. We reduced like 4 lines of code. Alright. Else if. Else if the variable hover on has a value of 1. So if I'm currently hovering over something, then I want to do this. What do I want to do? I want to check if whatever is in control, CTRL, because every single time it loops through this, it's going to update control with a new value. It's going to come in here. Does control equal the button that it's supposed to match? Yes, it does. Go back up and keep going. So I'm going to say what I want is, I'm not looking if it matches what it's supposed to match. I want to see if it doesn't match, because if it doesn't match, that means I'm not hovering over that button anymore. So I'm going to say exclamation point, and here I'll spread that out so that way you can see it. Exclamation point control. Nope, that's wrong. That's wrong. Not exclamation point control. It's if control exclamation points equal. If it does not equal, HB button, which index am I going to use? That's right, the one I have stored in index. Dot handle. If those two don't match up anymore, that means my mouse has moved. So what I want to do is I want to swap, I want to go back to drawing it as default. HB button, which index do I want to use? I want to use index dot draw default. And the next thing I want to do is I want to swap the value of hover on back to being off again. So that way it can start doing this check again. So if it's doing this check over and over again, if it matches, go ahead, swap it, swap the state of hover on. Now that hover's on, it skips this and goes right into here. As soon as my mouse is no longer hovering over it, it swaps the value back again, so that way it can start going back into here. And that's it. That's the function. And it should, knock on wood, it should work right away. Yep. It's hard to tell, but I can see it hovering on, but I don't see it hovering off. Did I type something wrong down here? This dot default. pressed bitmap, hover bitmap. I don't know. I don't think I had a typo, but whatever. Let's see. So it's off. Now it's on, and it's still on. HB button. Index. Alright, time to do some debugging, I guess. So I'm going to put some braces around this. And in here, I'm going to have it pop up a tooltip that says that it's here. Okay, so we're not getting here. Why aren't we getting there? Draw hover. Hover on equals 1. Index equals a index, yeah. Break. I'm going to add another brace to do more debugging. I'm going to take this and put it in here. Okay, it's hovering, and I'm not getting that message. Oh, wait. No, yeah, if hover on. Else if hover on. Maybe I do need an extra brace. I'll add the brace in. Okay, there we go. It's working. So just this should be this technically is all one line, but I don't know. Whatever. Easy fix. So I can go back to getting rid of that. Getting rid of that. Getting rid of that. And there we go. So I just added the brace to the first part. The second part, I'm pretty sure I don't need that. So let's see. Hover on, hover off, hover on, hover off, hover on, hover off. Yes, sir. Okay. If you're still with me, hopefully you had a control to do this with. If you didn't, just go into the Bitmap Maker and just create a simple bitmap with a couple of I don't know, a couple of circles on it or whatever, or just a rounded rectangle, like a rectangle for a background, a rounded rectangle with maybe a gradient brush, and then another one on top of that, and then maybe a rounded rectangle. Draw a rounded rectangle or something. Just create a simple button, because we're going to go into vectorizing, and you're going to want to have something to vectorize. What you can also do, see, I'm going to be vectorizing these, so you're not going to have the option to try it on your own. You know what I'll do? I'll create a separate paste. I'm going to create a separate paste with all of these. So let me before I do anything to these, I'm going to paste those in here, and I'll try to remember to do this. Alright, I'll try to remember to make a paste of those. You should have your own button. That's the purpose of this tutorial. Hopefully you have your own button. Because everything that I've done so far would be, I'm pretty sure everything is identical so far, because we haven't done anything to the actual button. Like, you might have a couple more options up in here, but other than that, everything everything's the same. Like we haven't touched the bitmap itself. Because that's where it'll differ. Like you'll use different values than me. But the process is the same. Okay, so we have a hover function. We can create new buttons. Alright. Let's vectorize. No, let's add the pressed function. Let's add the pressed function. So if we press on our button, we should get it to go to either our test label. Oh yeah, I don't have that code in yet. Derp. Or whatever. I'll leave that for now. Let's go code that in. Okay. If I press on it, it's going to come in here. Let's make sure it's coming in here. Tooltip. Here. Let's give it some space. If everything's working properly, when I press on this, I should get the tooltip. There we go. It's working properly. Okay, what do I want to do in here? The first thing I'm going to do when I come into here is I'm going to turn off my hover function. Set timer. I called mine HB hover. Was it HB hover function or HB? What did I call it? Yeah, HB hover function. I'm going to turn off the HB hover function, so that way, while a button's pressed down, it's not going to be trying to hover over other buttons. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, I'm going to draw the pressed bitmap. So I'm going to take this set image, and I'm going to be, instead of drawing the hover bitmap, I'm going to be drawing the pressed bitmap. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a while loop. So that way, as long as I'm still holding my mouse down, it's just going to make it sleep. While get key state. L button. While the key state for L button is still pressed, then all it's going to do is just sleep for 10 milliseconds. That's all it's going to do. So if I'm still pressing it down, it's just going to sleep again. If I'm still pressing it down, it's just going to sleep again. Once it's done sleeping, it is going to I'm going to turn the timer back on. Then I'm going to get the current control that's under my cursor. I'm going to get the control that's under my cursor, and I'm going to check to see if it matches this button's handle. If equals, this dot handle, because I'm inside the class now, so I don't have to use the button name like HB button index blah blah blah. I can just use this dot. Why is my cursor moving on its own? I think my battery's starting to die. My cursor's wants to move on its own. This dot hwind. If those two match, that means my mouse is still over the button. If it is, what I want to do is there's a couple of things I want to do. I want to go directly to drawing it in its hover state. So I'm going to say this dot draw hover. I also want to do that. I want to check to see if I have anything in my label variable. If I do have anything in my label variable, yeah, my mouse is dying. What do I want to do? I know it's dying. I'm just going to change it. Alright, if up in here, what I want to cheat. I want to look at how I did it before. I'll cheat at the end to make sure that everything's okay, but I don't want to cheat. I want to do this from scratch. I want to do like this is almost, I don't know if I need to do this here, because I'm going to be doing it down there anyways. Yeah, I'm going to get in the create trigger. I'm going to take this out for now, because the way I'm thinking is in my process in my head right now, it's redundant. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if the label if there's something in the label, I'm going to check if it's a function. If it is a function, then I'm going to set the label as a call to the function, or a function object. I'm going to create a function. I think that's what it's called, a function object. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that function. I don't know, do I want to do it that way? I don't know if this is going to get, like, is creating that function object going to be a problem? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to go back to my trigger object again, and I'm going to paste that back in. All right. If it's a label, it's going to check to see if it's a function or not. If it is a function, I'm going to create that function object, and I'm going to say that this dot type equals function. Somebody was showing me this yesterday too, and all right. Else, okay, so else. So if, I just want everyone to be clear of this structure here. So inside of parentheses, I have my question. Is it a function object? Question mark. And then this is what happens. This stuff in between these two parentheses is what happens if that's true. This is other words. It's this. There is this same thing is function. Somebody, as I seen yesterday, I think it's the same, pretty much the same. It's is label, which can do a test to see if it's a label. And I'm going to pass it this dot label. No, I don't want to. I don't want to check that. I don't need to check that, because if the label exists, then it's a label. That's it. That's all there is to it. I don't need to check. If you're an idiot and you did something that's not a label and not a function, I don't care. That's your problem. So I'm just going to say other words, the type, this dot type, colon equals a label. In other words, if there's nothing in the variable this dot label, then else this dot type colon equals. Do I even need to do this? No, I don't even need to do this. No, I don't even need to do that. If you type something into here, and if it's not a label or a function, you deserve what you get. So there, it's either a function or it's a label. If label has anything in it, it's a label or a function. That's it. Down in my key pressed here, I'm going to check. I'm going to say if this dot type equals function, then what it's going to do is it's going to call that function. So it's going to be this dot label dot call. Else, I don't need to check. I don't need to check if it's a function or not, because that's the only option left. No, that's not right, because I'm not checking. That's right. Okay. Else if this dot type equals label. And make sure I added all that. Yeah, label. This dot type label, this dot type function. Okay. All right. So if it's, in other words, if it's a label, then I'm going to go sub this dot label. So I've drawn it to be hover. If my cursor's still over it, I've drawn it to be hover. I've checked whether I'm going to a label or a function, and I've gone to there. That is, I think that's it. I think that's it. Else there's only, this is whether my button's over it or not. So else there's only one thing I need to do. Else this dot draw default. I think. Alright. I can collapse this back a little bit. And I think that's it. If I click on it, come on. Yeah. And it went to the function or whatever it was. So let's make sure. It should beep 3 times. There we go. If I move it over here and then release, it shouldn't beep at all. And it didn't. Perfect. Okay. The code is done. Now it's just about vectorizing this or scaling, making this scalable. To do that, we need to go through all of its values. Alright, let's do it. Let's just get it over with. This is going to be, I'm going to take a copy of this so that way I always have a reference to it, and I'm going to put it right there. Because everything, all of these other coordinates are based on those coordinates. So this is the width. This dot width. This dot height. This first thing here. The first, I'm only going to be, my button's always going to be starting from there. So the X position and the Y position are always going to be the same. I don't need to do anything with these. If I was drawing things in the middle of my button, like a little, if I had like a little icon over on one side of it and I want to scale that too, then I would scale that based on the size. It's a good idea not to draw that, but you can scale it over. But because everything here is based on this X and Y position, and it's just the width and the height that changes, it's only these 2 values that I ever need to change. So I take this and I say, to make sure that I don't accidentally forget something, I'm going to duplicate and then comment it out. And now in here I'm going to do this dot width plus 4. So it's originally, the bitmap is 69, this is 73, so it's the width, this is my width, plus 4. This one here is going to be this dot height plus 3. Next, my gradient brushes, I need to do those. Duplicate, comment, this dot width minus 2. This dot height. Duplicate, comment. This dot width plus 1. This dot height 26, 27 minus 1. This one here is this dot roundness. Alright, this, I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to duplicate this line, comment it out, paste in here, and adjust. This is 59, which is minus 10 from the width. Minus 10. This is minus 6 from the height. I'm going to come here, copy these, duplicate, comment, paste. This is 66, so this is width minus 3. This is 23, so that's width height minus 4. And the roundness. Duplicate, comment, copy this, paste it in. This is width minus 2. This is height minus 1. Duplicate, comment, paste. This is width minus 1. This is height minus 2. Here, duplicate, comment. This one here, duplicate, comment. Okay, let's get color. Font color top. No, font color bottom. So because the order of things, the things that are lower down get added afterwards. So since this is the first text that shows up, this is the one that's on the bottom. So I'm going to replace this color with this dot font color bottom. This one's going to be the one that's on top. So I'm going to duplicate, comment, and this is this dot font color top. Alright, as for the text itself, it's not going to be button. This is going to be this dot text. This isn't going to be size, and that's not going to be bold. So I'm going to get rid of the bold. I'm going to get rid of that. So its size is going to be this dot font size. Make sure the quotes are proper. Center, center, center. The color, yeah, that's brush. That's that. This is going to be this dot font. And this is going to be this dot width, this dot height, because I want my text to be centered. I might have to adjust this afterwards because I just adjusted this, which is going to change that value. So what I'm going to do, because I know I'm going to actually have to, I actually know I'm going to have to change this. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to set this to 0 and this to 0, because that old width of 50, that's why it had such a huge offset. So I'm going to reset this to 0, 0. This is my background color, so when I do the next one, I'm going to have the background color below and to the right of my thing. So actually this is going to be 1, 1. I'm going to set this to 1, 1. Okay. This line, duplicate, comment. I can pretty much just take this whole line here and paste it in. The only thing that's going to be different between the two of them is this offset here. This is going to be 0. This is going to be 0. Other than that, it's identical. And that's it. I'm going to leave everything, the comments in just for now. Make sure everything's working properly. If I have to fix anything, I have the old values to reference. So this is, I think, the default bitmap. So there we go. So now we have a default bitmap, but I need to change this brush here. This brush here is my background for my window. So I need my variable button background color. Oh, actually, this dot button background color. So that's this. And there we go. I don't like the size. I can see that some of the, when I created the buttons, some of the things are filling over more than they should. So what I'm going to have to do is figure out which one it is and adjust it. So this is my background. This is the first layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this line, I'm going to duplicate it and comment it out, and I'm going to play around with it for a second to see if I can you know, it might be this here. No, that's a, yeah, it might be that there. I'm going to get rid of that, uncomment that again. Let's just see if I comment this out and run it again, I'm going to see what it looks like. Yeah, so definitely there's something going on with this. So I'm going to duplicate it, comment it out, and I'm going to do width plus 2. and height. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, no, no. No, no, no. I'm going to do width minus 2. This should be width minus 2, I think. And this should be... That might be okay. I'm going to check what it looks like. Okay. So it's set at x1. I'm going to try x2, y2, width minus 4. Alright. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm going to undo completely everything I just did. I'm going to duplicate it again. And this should be not -1, it should be 1. 1, 1. This is going to be width minus 2. This is going to be height minus 2. A little better. A little better. Let's see if any remnants of this one. Yeah, so I don't think this one's playing an impact on... There's a little bit of a... I can see a little bit of these layers that aren't supposed to be showing. I can see them behind the outline for the button. So that's what I'm fixing. Let me try commenting out this one. No, that's not it. Let me try commenting out. This definitely shouldn't be the one, but yeah, that's not it. It has to be one of them. It's wait. Oh, is this? I thought. No, that's not it. Let me try going over by 2 pixels. I don't think this is the one. Yeah, I'm going to say that this is not the one, so I'm going to undo those changes that I just did. I think I did see a change, though. Okay, so the height definitely needs to be reduced. Okay. Is it this one? Okay, so this one I'm going to mark as done, just so I don't keep going back to it, because it's getting hard to see with all these comments. I'm going to mark that one as done. Alright, how about you? Let's mark you. Maybe. And I'm going to comment both of them out at the same time. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. 0xFF. Oops. So in the background color, I forgot to add that. So I'm an idiot sometimes, all the time, most of the time. Alright. Alright, I don't like this. I'm going to change the background color. Okay, looks a little bit better. I need a darker color though, actually. Yeah, I think I'm okay for now. I think I'm okay with it for now. Let's add these back in. Ooh. Ooh. Minus 10. When I created this button, I did it really quickly. When I designed this button, I did it really quickly. Usually I spend a little bit more time on it. So that way I don't have to do all this editing. Height width -2. Oh, this is a brush. What am I doing? That's a brush. Fill rectangle. I have this, there's this weird edge right there that's not going the way I want it. Create line brush, that's not it. Width -2. I don't know. Yeah, I think that looks fine. I think that looks okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm done with that one. Now I can get rid of this extra crap. Okay, so that's one done. Next. $69.27. Just so I know. this dot background color, duplicate, comment out. This is this dot width +4, this dot height +3, duplicate comment, this dot width -2, this dot height duplicate comment, this dot width, this definitely seems wrong. I might have to adjust this one afterwards. This dot width +1, this dot height -1. Yeah, that definitely shouldn't be that way. Comment, this dot width -2, this dot height -3. Right, duplicate comment. This dot width -3, this dot height -4, duplicate comment, this dot width -2, this dot height -2, 1. Duplicate comment, this dot width -1, -2. These ones here I can just copy and paste. Alright, next bitmap done. Let's see what it looks like as hover. Okay, so I definitely have the corners issue again. So there was one that stood out. That's this one right here. Definitely want that to be 1, 1, width -2, height -2. Perfect. No, wait. Yeah, height -3. Perfect. Okay. That's 2 done. Almost done. And then this class is complete. Now each of these brushes here, these are line brushes for all the different layers. If I wanted to, what I could do for part of my class is I could use variables for them. So I can adjust, or I can just come in here manually and adjust these colors so that way I get different colored buttons. So all of these colors that I have, I can either associate them with variables that I can be part of when I create my button, or I can just create a copy of this class for a new project and just go in and hard code them. Alright. I really want to smoke, but I think we're close enough that I can suffer for another couple of minutes. Let's be honest, there's like nobody watching this. Nobody watching this. But whatever. 6927. 6927. Alright, I'm going to jump right down to the text because I know that I can get that out of the way quick. Background color. Duplicate comment. Done. Duplicate comment. Duplicate comment. This one definitely looks pretty wrong. Width +3, that definitely doesn't look right. Whatever, I have to start with what it says. Height -2, 2769. Width +1. Yeah, I know that that's going to be wrong. I've done it a couple of times now, so I know it's going to be wrong. I'm just going to skip to the part where I change it to what I really want it. Height stays the same, width -2. Pretty sure that this one's going to be wrong too, so I'm just going to jump ahead with -2, height -2, whatever. Duplicate comment, and almost done, almost done. Width -10, height -6. Width -7, height -6. Height -10, -6. Width -9, height -6. Width -2, height -1. width minus 1, height minus 2. Alright, let's see. Hover, pressed. Alright, perfect, works. Let's change last test. Test label turns to, here I'm going to create a new button, duplicate that line. This is going to go to the test function. This window 1, I'm going to change its Y position. Okay, so one of the neat things I can do with this, because I've used these variables here, or one of the neat things you can do with these variables here, is I can take, because Y up here is a variable and it's been set to a value of 10, if I want this button to move down a little bit, if I want to create another button just below it, I can do Y plus equals the height of the last button, which is 30, plus a little bit of padding in between them of, let's say, 5 pixels. So it's whatever the Y was plus the height of the last button plus 5 pixels. And I think that is pretty much it. I'll set this to a roundness of 0. And there we go. And if I want to change the font color or whatever else I want, it does look like my text is a little bit high, so I would want to go in and adjust my text. So right now this is at, everything is at x0, y0, but I want it to go down a pixel or two. So I'll move this down to, let's say, 3, no, x1 is still the same. I'll move the y down to about 3 and this down to about 2. Maybe just 1. 2, 1, 2, 1. Yeah, that's a little better. And then I'll do something like, let's change that to size 12. Font color top. Let's do, and there we have it. Change that. Do I not have a beep there? Test function. I might have an error in my code. Yeah, what's going on? Did I have a typo? No, I don't think I had a typo. Alright, so I have an error. Let's debug. I'm going to get rid of this stuff. Alright, Okay, so it is a function. This dot label call, is that not right? Is that not the right? That might not be the right syntax. I don't know. This dot label function func this dot label. I think that's right. I don't know. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna cheat, and I'm gonna open up something that I have that already has that code. Because we're already at 3.5 hours, so I think you can forgive me. Now, if I can only find that class, which I'm not guaranteed to be able to do. Okay, scripts. In here, maybe. Testing angles. No. 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 Damn. Damn. Oh. Oh, okay, okay. I pulled up my, I see what I did wrong. It's this here I need to assign to a variable. So I'm going to assign it to this dot function. This dot function colon equals function this dot label. Down in here, if it's a type function, I'm going to do this dot function dot call. Which means I can probably do away with, I could probably reorganize my logic to skip something. If this dot type, if this dot type is label, else draw, yeah, whatever. I think it's good. So all I did was I changed it from being this dot label to this dot function dot call, and up in the trigger, add trigger, I needed to assign a variable to be the return from that. So that's it. Now, now I get that function working. And you can just continue adding as many buttons as you want. Okay, everything, let me change one more thing. I want to make sure that everything is exactly the same when I give the copy. So I'll come up with a couple of different button colors. Let's go random. Wow, my computer is running so slow. I don't know if yellow would show up well. Let's go with okay. I want to change a couple of the sizes. So, like I said, these are scalable. So obviously, if I change the size of them, they should look okay. 50, 250 by 25. 80 by 20, and 150 by 60. And then I'll go change some roundness. This one's going to be a roundness of 5. This one's going to be a roundness of, I don't know what the sizes are. Height of 20. Can't do that one. I'll leave that one no roundness. This one roundness of 10. There. So all kinds of different buttons. But that is it. I will be sure to leave a link to the paste for this in the description. If you got this far in the video, kudos to you. I don't know if I could have done it, but there you have it. If you want to create your own class, it's not that difficult. It takes a little bit of time. It would have taken a little less time if I was just coding it myself, but you know, that is it. I'm not going to talk any more about it. Links are in the description when this video finally comes up. Peace. I am out.